Arrow Season 5, Episode 3, A Matter of Trust. This was an interesting episode for sure. We got to see Diggle in this one. We kind of got to see Deadshot come back, and I want to start with that because what they did was really cool. It was really cool, and at the same time it was really sad because I love Deadshot in this series. And I mentioned this a bunch of times, especially in the last season. The reason that they were just killing everybody off in Argus is because of the Suicide Squad movie that was coming out. So it was like, alright, we gotta kill off Deadshot, we gotta kill off Amanda Waller, we have to basically wipe away Argus because it's not gonna mean as much anymore now that we have the movies coming out. They kind of just wanted to pretty much cancel it, which I really hate it because I love those characters. And then we get this episode. Diggle, of course, is in prison, and you know, he's in prison. He gets put into his cell, and I figured this was gonna happen because, of course, they did, you know, the recap and stuff, and they show something from, like, you know, from the, I believe he did die in the last season. So they show it when he dies, and you know, the building blows up and all that, and they talk about Diggle and his brother and stuff. They don't show the building thing, actually. I'm just making crap up, but he's in the cell, and I was like, okay. Honestly, the first thing I thought when that happened, he's like, he freaks out, and they show Deadshot right behind him. I was just like, thank you, Barry. That was the first thing I thought, because I was like, this has to be one of the things they changed in the timeline, is that Barry did his thing, and that's why they didn't, I was thinking that's why they didn't show the recap of that part where he was in the building, because it wasn't going to be him dead, like, whatsoever. Because, of course, if Barry changed the timeline, then it would have turned out totally different. He, of course, wouldn't have died. So there would be no reason to show that, because Diggle would remember, like, how'd you survive the building or whatever. So when it first happened, I was just like, thank you, Barry. I was like, he runs back in time so much, and it finally paid off. And then it turns out, unfortunately, as it went through the episode, Diggle realized that he was crazy because he was going through the guilt of having killed his brother in the past season, and he still feels like that even though he didn't commit this crime that he's being accused of, he deserves to be punished in some regard for what he did to his brother, because, as he puts it, technically he didn't have to pull the trigger, which is technically true, but his brother was freaking nuts. But it was also his brother, so it's not like I can be like, he'd get over it. It makes a lot of sense that he'd have that, honestly, insane sort of guilt. So it was kind of cool seeing Deadshot come back. I always love seeing that actor. The last time we saw him was actually on Earth 2 in the last season of Flash, so that was cool. And it was like, alright, we get to, you know, see him come back again. But it was cool. I was like, it's awesome that he's alive. And it's like, you know, they didn't find your body. When they mentioned that, it was a crazy roller coaster, because he shows up. I'm like, thank you, Barry. Finally did something awesome with running back in time. And then they go through the conversation. He's like, how are you alive? And he's like, they never found your body. And I was like, oh, that's not as cool. They just didn't find his body. It wasn't a totally different, you know, circumstance with, you know, their situation. It wasn't, because whenever time changes, all you have to do is be like, oh yeah, you took off when Argus fell. Like, that's all they would have had to do to keep him alive. But it's like, oh, they never found your body. I was like, oh, I guess that was a simple way to do it. So I was like, that's a little lackluster to me. And then keeps going. I'm still happy. I'm like, he's in this show. They're going to break out. That's what I was thinking. Like, they're going to break out of prison somehow. Because that's just their character. That was Deadshot more than anything. But they're going to team up, and somehow they're going to escape and prove Diggle's innocence and stuff like that. I couldn't tell by the beginning. I was like, I still don't know if this is just going to be his own thing for the season, or how the heck this is supposed to play out, or what the deal is. But it's going through, and then Lila shows up, and I was happy she showed up, because I was like, I don't know if how soon we're going to get to see Lila, or how long they're going to hold that off and stuff. So she shows up really early on in the episode, which was good, and then she shows up again at the actual cell, and that's when we find out that Deadshot isn't even there, and it was funny, because I was thinking that when he was talking to her, I'm like, does she not see Deadshot, like, right over his shoulder? Like, that's a big deal. Like, this dude is supposed to be dead. And I'm like, she doesn't seem to have a reaction. Like, I know it's, you know, they're standing in front of each other, but she can see, like, right past his shoulder. I'm like, she's not freaking out about this or anything. And then when she mentioned that he's dead, they have the reveal, and I was like, oh, crap, he was crazy. And Deadshot is actually dead. And then I was kind of sad again, because I'm like, that means he's not alive. So we won't have him in the show. We officially won't have him in the show until maybe Barry can run back in time again. I'm sure he will at some point. That's a guarantee, actually. So maybe they'll decide to just do it. Maybe the Suicide Squad will just really fail, and they'll be like, you know what? Let's just put them all back in the TV show. They'll bring everybody back, and that's just how it'll play out. I don't know, but it was a crazy roller coaster with that. Where I was like, he's alive. He's, they kind of gave a meh sort of reason to me at least. It makes a lot of sense if he were alive that's what would have happened. They didn't find his body and he lived. And I'd be like, that's actually logical. For some reason, I was being kind of a dick about it and being like, I don't like that reasoning. But crazy roller coaster thinking he's alive and stuff, and then sadly he is not. So it was like, that really sucked. You find out that he just wasn't alive. But it does add to Diggle's story where he's really going through this guilt, because I thought it was just going to be like, he was upset about it and stuff, and it actually explains some stuff that happened, because when they're talking back and forth, there's a part where Deadshot is like, oh, all that guilt you put on me for killing your brother, you should have been putting on yourself. And when he said that, I was like, that line doesn't make sense. It's like, he just killed his brother. It's not like he killed his brother, all those years ago, and then he was acting like Deadshot did it. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he say that? Like, he thought he killed his brother all those years ago, and then he just did it like a couple months ago. It makes no sense to say that. And now it makes a lot more sense where they'd have the line in there, because it's Diggle talking to himself. It's like, all that hatred I put on him, I should put it on myself right now. And so it kind of makes sense that they'd have that weird line. It could have just been written oddly in general, but I'm just going to give that excuse that it was a weird bit of dialogue because it was Diggle actually talking to himself. Because I'm like, that makes no sense. He thought you killed his brother years ago. He just killed his brother like a couple months ago. So that kind of fits now. It actually makes a lot more sense. But I like that side of the storyline. And of course, it does end. We actually find out that he's in the States, which I guess makes sense. I don't really know how military stuff works out. I was just assuming, especially considering what it was, I thought he'd be in a much worse location. I didn't think he'd be... I mean, he might not actually be in Star City, but he's basically close. If Lila was like, hey, she just strolled on over and was like, hey, I need you to break Diggle out of prison, he's like 20, 30 miles away, if that. So I was like, it's really weird that he'd be so close to the city. Like, I don't know where they're supposed to be as far as in the country, but I'm like, he was overseas. I don't think he'd be taken so close to home, although she is, had Argus. There's a bunch of excuses I could easily make up to say why he'd be there, but they have to explain that in the next episode, because it just made no sense. I don't think, if you're going to prison for like some crazy charges like that, for killing a bunch of other people and stealing a nuke and crazy, just real crazy crap, they aren't going to be like, you know what, we'll let you go to prison close to your house. They're going to like really screw you over because you killed a bunch of innocent people and tried to steal a nuke. So it just seemed weird. It seemed super lax to me too. Like, he was in a really clean prison. That's just me. I was just like, man, he should have a much worse time. He shouldn't even have the chance to talk to himself. He should be like getting beat up and tortured and all sorts of crazy stuff for what they believe that he did. And he was kind of just like, hey, honey, I didn't do this. They cut his phone call off super early. It seemed like he just sat down and like, all right, that's time. I'm like, that had to have been less than a minute of even screen time for us. I'm pretty sure that was less than a minute. And like, all right, I'm like, that's the harshest thing that seemed to happen to him the whole time he was in prison. So it seemed like a really light sentence considering what they think he actually did, which I still don't understand. The whole him writing a note and stuff, because the guy left it, and a bunch of weird stuff. He was tied up and they left him tied up, and it's like, I don't understand what the deal is. I guess, same thing. They, just said like, oh, we had to beat him up to tie him up. I guess that's it. And then I guess the note was supposed to be his I'm guilty note, like it failed, so I'm upset now and I'm writing this to prove my guilt. I don't know. It just seems really weird and convoluted. Like, a 2-bit lawyer, I feel like, could have been like, no one's going to do that. That's dumb. And he's free to go. Like, I don't know. That's just me. I don't know. But I am excited that Diggle is going to be a part of the main story in the next episode. It seems like it's going to lead to a really cool contrast between Oliver's normal mission with his team and what he's going to have to do in the next episode where he fights against his team. So I'm actually very excited for that, and just to see how they end up doing this story, because if he breaks out, he'll be a vigilante. He'll be, a criminal on the run. I didn't mean to say vigilante. That's a totally different thing. But he'll be a criminal on the run. So I don't know how that's supposed to play out, but I'm excited to see what they decide to do with it. Of course, the other part of this story involves Thea, one of the smaller stories, and it was her dealing with that reporter where it's like, oh, you know, the big news story is that Oliver hires the drunken former police captain. That's a terrible choice. And then Thea tries to correct it, and she talks with the lady, and I knew it was going to go bad. Like, as soon as she said that, like, he actually didn't make the choice, the first thing I thought was, like, she's just going to change the story. Like, it's always like, oh, I'll retract it or whatever. But, of course, you know, she tried to play Thea, and it was like, turns out he didn't make the decision. He's just dumb. He doesn't know what's happening behind his back. And I'm like, oh boy. Like, I knew that was going to happen. It makes things worse. Oliver, of course, you know, he solves the whole problem and he still hires Lance, which I thought was actually a pretty cool thing to do. And he's like, you know, I know you're the perfect man for the job. So I thought that was a cool moment. And then I thought it would be worse because Thea, you know, she stops the lady and the lady, of course, tries to be friends with her. And she cuts her off. I thought we were going to see her kind of regress for a second where she was going to go like, you know, Lazarus Pit evil, but that didn't end up happening. She just naturally threatened her. It's like, you know, it's funny the world we live in where an actual legitimate threat is you'll be lucky to have a blog, and blog is one of the least threatening words any human could possibly say. And I'm like, it's weird the world we live in because that's not a threatening word, but it's a legitimate threat because this woman's a journalist and people have blogs now. And I was just like, wow. That was a real threat using an actual word. And it was just weird to me. I was just like, wow, the world we live in. So I thought we'd have something a little bit darker there, but it just seemed like a natural threat. It's just like, hey, you suck and don't F with me again or I'll really destroy you. So don't know if that'll actually lead to anything. It's a little hard to tell, but I thought it was cool. I was like, alright, you know, she had her moment. She didn't like snap and push her against the wall, which I thought for sure she was going to do, but just a calm, natural threat, like I'm not to be trifled with. And that was, you know, a nice, simple little thing. And then, of course, we have the main story for this episode. And I liked it. I thought it was really cool. It's even stronger than the last one where it was, you know, the team dynamic and how he can trust them or can't trust them. And Oliver has to deal with Wild Dog, you know, and really himself. And this was something I really liked about the other episodes where the team, you know, specifically, you know, they make Wild Dog, of course, he's like the one who is like the real rebel, but they make it where it's like he did something wrong, but it can still go back to Oliver, and that was like the whole point, is that he is the leader of this team, and whatever they do is ultimately a consequence to him. Like, he is, you know, it's like the cause and effect type of thing. He's the cause for every effect because he's at the top of the food chain. And I thought that was cool. It's like they make it a way to show Wild Dog, as well as Evelyn, like they both did something against the rules. They did something wrong. But if Oliver wasn't so hardcore against them going out on a mission, like, you guys can't possibly be ready and I don't need to waste my time and this and that. If he wasn't so much against it and just trusted him in the first place, then none of that would have happened. And I'm like, that makes sense. They're both technically wrong because, I mean, it's not like they beat the guys and that was it, or they, you know, the guys escaped. He did make a supervillain, so it's a little different than a typical situation where if they went in and beat everybody, like, alright, they had a big thing, and he's, you know, not only did he make a supervillain, but he did also cause it to where the DA wasn't able to flip the guy and have him snitch on like a bunch of other people. So it was like he really did screw up. But if Oliver wasn't so, you know, distrusting of people, like especially his brand new team that he wanted to create, that never would have happened in the first place. So it's like it puts blame on both of them, and they both have to have a correction. And I kind of like that idea where it's like it's not just this guy's fault or it's not just Oliver's fault. They both did something that screwed up. But Oliver ultimately, he wanted this team. He brought them in because he trusted them just enough. But then he decides to keep pushing them away, so he has to really make it work. So I loved the dynamic of that. I thought it was played out fairly well. Don't know how much that's going to work in the next episode with them fighting. And not only that, but Felicity decides to tell, I only know him by Ragman, unfortunately. I didn't even bother to listen to his real name. But she tells him about what happened with the missile, and I like that scene, but it's also scary because he was so messed up. He didn't even have a response. He just walked away, and that's kind of why I like that scene. It just left, you know, she was upset, of course, because she felt so bad about everything that happened. But for me, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to play out too well, because the first thing I thought was, he's going to snap when he finds out. They didn't do it the generic way, where it's like, you did that, and then it's a big argument. She did actually tell him, and I appreciated that. It was like, every once in a while, somebody just does it, where it's like, the person feels bad, they just tell you the truth, and then they hope it works. So, we just have to hope it works. I don't know if he'll snap, or what the deal is, but we'll have to see what happens. Along the lines of, you know, the characters going out on their first team mission, which in itself is pretty cool. They have the really funny ending sequence where they leave out everybody, beat all the bad guys, and they do like the huge explosion in slow motion. I don't remember any episode where they ever did it that way. Like, I'm sure there's been some slow motion scenes where people walk away and do the cool look, but he had like a full-on Power Rangers explosion, like in slow motion, where everything exploded behind him, and he's just walking by himself in slow motion. And I was just like, that's really cheesy and funny to me. But not only did we have a pretty cool action scene there where the whole team's working together, they're saving each other, and Oliver has that cool moment where he shoots Samson, and then I'm assuming that the arrow reeled itself in, because I'm like, there's no way that he could pull that guy up into the air like that. So with it happening all so quickly, it was just like they both kind of flew towards each other. I'm like, I'm just going to assume that the thing had like some electronic component to it, because it doesn't make sense that he'd be able to pull him up in the air. But that was a cool thing where he pulls him towards him as he's dropping and he punches him. And the way he beat him was cool too, because he's like, you know, I don't feel pain. And he cuts his tendons, and then he still tried to fight, which I loved, and he's just like flopping around. But we also got to see in this episode, for the very first time, we got to see Mr. Terrific in the full-on costume. So that was really awesome. They have Curtis with, you know, the actual T on his face, and they do it where the guy's a wrestler, which is different from the actual comic books, where he's, I think he's just like an actual, like a different superhero or something. So I thought that was cool, and you know, they have a typical reason why he, you know, wears the jacket, and it's just a cool wrestler that Curtis was a big fan of. So I was like, that's kind of an awesome way to do it. They gave him the mask and stuff. Curtis was also hilarious in this episode. Like, he was stuttering like crazy. Everything he said was funny. When he first talked to the dude, he's like, hey, let's leave together. He's like, I don't mean together. And he takes the glove, he's like, bam, you know, happily married man. And he was just tripping over himself so much in this episode, and I was just laughing. Like, every time he had something to say, it was just funny to me. So I just loved, like, Curtis in this whole episode was hilarious to me. Like, he did, like, nothing he did outside of that ending fight had actual critical relevance. And, you know, him probably convincing Felicity, those were like his two biggest moments, were, you know, the Felicity conversations that he had and his part in the big fight at the end. But everything else was just so much comedy, and it worked to me. I thought all of his lines worked, with him stumbling over himself, like when the guy mentioned, like, oh, did you happen to have a crush on him too? And it's like, that's besides the point. Little stuff like that, they did really well. And him saying, like, you know, suit up, and he's like, you know, is that a thing that we all say? He was like, I thought we were all going to say it together, or is that your thing? And then he's like, you know, that's his thing for everyone, for future reference. So just all his little stuff I thought was great in this episode. We haven't seen his husband yet, but we did get a reference to him in this episode. Not only the ring scene, but, you know, when he talks to him at the end. I think that actually has been the first reference of his husband in this season, actually. So we might get to see him. He still doesn't know that he's doing the superhero thing. He just thinks he's working late, which I didn't even consider where he's fake working at, because they haven't talked about, you know, like Queen Consolidated or any of that stuff, and how, you know, they changed the name and all that, and who it went to. I don't even remember what they did with Queen Consolidated, if I'm being 100% honest. I don't even remember who they sold it to or how any of that stuff ended anymore. That's how much I forget season to season. He sold it off, I think, 2 seasons ago, or last season. Something happened and it's gone. But now there's like no references to it, but they're still in the building because they take the elevator to the thing. And I don't know if that's where his mayoral stuff is happening, because clearly this set is the exact same place. Like, I can tell that they just changed the walls to look brighter, because all the walls were like marble and dark and stuff when it was Queen Consolidated, and now it's the mayor's office. Everything's just beige, and I'm like, that's exactly the same room, because when he leaves his main office, especially, they do it in this episode too, he left his main room and he went like to the right, and he went into the room where all the reporters were. I'm like, that's the exact layout of his office. Like, that's where he was, and then the big meeting room was like to the right. It was like through the glass doors. So they changed the doors and they changed the walls, and it's the same place. But they don't really say it's the same place, so I don't know what the deal is exactly, but it technically is. I don't know if it's the same place in the series, so it's a little bit confusing. I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to be his building, or if this is meant to be, because of the different colors, a totally different building. But when you have that much glass, it's kind of easy to tell it's the same building. Like, not that many places look as specific as they've had it. So I don't know if that's supposed to be his old office or what the deal is, because they don't really mention it, because it's just like, it doesn't really matter. But it's like it just seems like something that should probably be brought up, like, oh, we changed all of this because it's the mayor's office. It's one of those things where it's like, I wouldn't talk about this if they mentioned it in the premiere. Like, it's weird to me now because I know it's the same set and everything, but now I'm trying to make up my own conclusions. Like, is it the same location or is it not? Because they just kind of left it open, so it might not matter. It might not get answered because it's not supposed to matter, and it doesn't either way. But because they don't put that one sentence of exposition, like, yeah, and we changed this, unless I completely missed that, I have like this whole thing, like, is this supposed to be Queen Consolidated, where they changed it to the, he wanted it changed and that's where he wanted all his mayoral stuff to happen, or what the heck is the deal with all of this? So I don't know. He's still clearly still in the same building. They also make a reference to the elevator stuff, which I thought was awesome, because Curtis was like, did the people that built this know about your secret? And he's like, and then they cut him off, because clearly there's no real good answer to that, where he was just like, and then someone else starts talking. I'm like, that was it was a nice little joke where it's like, this is the comic book universe where things just get built inside of buildings and people may or may not know about it because someone has to keep a record of building an elevator, unless Oliver did it himself, which I doubt. He probably could. Who knows what the heck he can do, but I doubt it. But like this episode, enjoyed the flashback. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to skip through that. It was interesting, especially the ending where he was getting cut, and it was just, trusting his brothers. It actually fits, which I love this season. Last season, I was hating the flashbacks because it was just like, this happens, and that's the flashback. No tie-in. There were like 3 episodes that had tie-ins to the flashback, and every episode so far has had tie-ins. Where it's like, he trusts his brothers when he joins the Brava, so now he has to realize he must trust his team. And it's like, that actually makes sense, and it fits. It's not just somebody died in the flashback and they're doing this. It matches, and I freaking love that. So that's good. Felicity's boyfriend also talked to Oliver for a quick second. He made like the fake robbery to talk to him. So he's being a good guy. He's like, I know you do your own thing, and he just warns him, and that was it. So I thought that was cool. Prometheus gets mentioned, not seen, unfortunately, but I'm sure he'll be back. So excited for this next episode, of course. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about this one. But please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And definitely want to know what you guys want to see with the Diggle stuff, because who knows what's going to happen. But want to know what you think about it, what you thought about this one. So like I said, please comment below, let me know. And thanks for watching.